Howdy. This is your second video of 3 on cybersecurity terminology that you need to know for this course. Now, let me tell you why I like short definitions. Do you remember a preceding lecture where I said, here's my definition of jurisdiction? The power of a court or locale to regulate persons, objects, or conduct under their law. Are you good with that definition? Because if not, you can go online and find the legal definition of jurisdiction. Okay? Which do you prefer? So you will see that I like to keep it simple. I am not training you to be a lawyer. I'm training you to be a knowledgeable, technical person. So here are my definitions for some cybersecurity basics. Vulnerability, weakness in an asset. Exploit, capability to take advantage of a vulnerability. Threat, potential to cause serious harm. I don't have attack listed here, but attack is when I execute that threat. So, weakness in an asset. I leave my front door unlocked. I leave my front door unlocked and open. My house has a weakness. It is an asset. Exploit, the capability to take advantage of the vulnerability. Gee, you could walk into my house and steal some of my precious belongings. The threat, the potential to cause this by exploiting a vulnerability. Somebody's casing my neighborhood, and they think, that's interesting. Doors unlocked and open. The attack would be the execution of the threat. Same thing, weakness in an asset. A weakness or a vulnerability in an operating system. It may be there. In Stuxnet, some of the weaknesses or vulnerabilities that were exploited for the Stuxnet attack had been in the operating systems for years. First of all, someone has to know that they're there and how to exploit them, right? And once that's done, that you can create the threat and attack. Basic definitions. When you think vulnerability, weakness in an asset. When you think exploit, capability to take advantage of that. When you think threat, potential to cause serious harm by exploiting the vulnerability. Now, what do we mean by cybersecurity? You'll hear people use cybersecurity to describe network security or computer security or information security or myriad other terms. Basically, I like the textbook definition. The methods, techniques, and tools used to ensure that a computer system is secure. Great, simple. You also see it defined as the ability to protect or defend the use of cyberspace from cyber attacks, but then we have to figure out what cyberspace is, which is everything, the internet, telecommunication networks, whether they're hardwired or satellite or wireless, computer systems, embedded processors, and controllers. Network security, what I want you to pick up out of this slide is simply this. Everything we talk about access. We are going to avoid and keep track of unauthorized access, exploitation, modification, etc. I've put the terms in bold. Availability, you now know. Integrity, you now know. Authentication, we're going to talk about. Confidentiality, you now know. And non-repudiation. And by this time in the class, when you look at availability, integrity, and confidentiality, you think these are legally defined. We may have disagreements on technically how we define these terms. Doesn't matter. When we talk about the law, we will go to the legal definitions. Okay, so I like the simple definition. Computer security does what it's supposed to do and only what it's supposed to do. If I'm a lawyer either defending or attempting to prosecute in a either civil or criminal case, I'm going to go with the simple. Why? I'm presenting either to a jury who are made up of people who don't know and many times don't care, or to a judge, and most of your lawyers don't have a technical background. So I'm going to keep it simple when I explain it. However, the legal basis has to be in statute or court case. Now, I've highlighted at the bottom of the slide, describes protection of information and the level of protection that has been accomplished. If you're familiar with the NIST control families, which we will highlight in this course but not delve into, you'll know that the first step in assessing and controls is to define the criticality of your data. Is it high, medium, or low? Meaning, how important is it? How critical is it to you? I'm guessing you would all want your GPA, your health records, your financial records protected at a high level, whereas other information, medium or low. I can drive by your car and see your license number, right? I can see your license plate. I can see what model of car it is, all right? That's a low level. You don't have it hidden from me. Same thing with the system. There's certain data, low level, medium level, high level. So when we talk about information security, we want to talk about the protection of information as well as the level of protection that has been accomplished. Again, that's going to be a legal point. If I am defending someone in a data breach, I'm going to claim that I did all reasonable things I could according to industry standards, high level, sorry the breach happened. If I am prosecuting or trying to sue someone who caused a data breach, I'm going to do the opposite. Your level of protection was not where it should have been, and therefore you were negligent in contract breach or something. Social engineering, you're familiar with this. If you haven't or don't know who Kevin Mitnick is, I would suggest that you take a few minutes and Google it and see his exploits. I have personally, it can be through phone calls, it could also be through personal interaction, but basically it's where someone's trying to trick someone into revealing information. Getting them to click on a bogus email, a bogus website. Gee, that looked like my Bank of America website. You know, gee, that call sounded like it came from the IRS. Nope, that was social engineering. A digital form of this is phishing, and we see a lot more of this going on, where they're targeting to get information, trying to make it look authentic, but it's not. I go to Purdue a couple of times a year, Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana, and I always try to stop by one of my favorites, Scotty Brew House, and I was surprised to see a headline once that all 4,000 of their employees' W-2 forms had been compromised in a phishing attack. And my first thought was, wow, that must have been a great phishing attack to have gotten all the employees to respond. No, it was worse. Someone in the payroll office clicked on believed a phishing email, an authentic looking but bogus email that looked like it was from the CEO, and he was asking for all W-2s for all 4,000 employees. Okay? Malware. Now, mal means bad. So viruses, Trojans, spyware, adware, rootkits. We're not going to worry about these details so much. I want to keep this at a high level of what we need to understand our books and cases. It's basically bad stuff. It institutes ransomware, it steals protected data, it deletes documents, it does something to prevent this system from its normal functionality. And remember what the definition I like. The computer, the system, whatever, does exactly what it's supposed to do, not more, not less. Here's a term that is completely confused in law. For instance, in Texas, there's a law called the Identity Theft and Enforcement Protection Act. It's easy to read, about 8 pages, describing reasonable procedures to protect data, and it has an exception if the data is encrypted, but it never defines encryption, and we don't have a legal definition for encryption. Encryption is basically converting from plain text to ciphertext. It is not a yes or no. If something is encrypted, it's on a continuum from weak to strong encryption. So according to this Texas law, I could say, yeah, the data is encrypted by, some kind of little gizmo that a junior high kid could operate, right? So encryption's a term that gets thrown around. What you need to know, it's based on products of 2 large prime numbers if you're interested. It can be symmetric or asymmetric. Of course, if you know cybersecurity here, you know that when we talk about encryption, data criticality and the like, we wanted to go with the asymmetric encryption because it's more complicated, it is have more overhead, however, it's much harder to break. Another term you'll see, identification authentication. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I want you familiar with these as you read these cases, especially in Chapter 1, where it comes up with the key lessons and the commonalities and the recommendations by the FTC. If something was improperly authenticated, we tend to think of authentication. I change my password. I get a text on my phone, hey, is this really you? Authentication, something you know, something you have, something you are, Yeah, give me my mother's maiden name. Sure, here's a token or passcode on my smartphone that I have to now send to you. Here's my fingerprint or retina scan or something like that. Non-repudiation is the basis of e-commerce and financial transactions. You don't have to worry about technical details, only that it refers to a mechanism for ensuring the integrity, there's that word again, a legally defined word, and the origin of data. You would never have any type of financial transaction that does not have a non-repudiation in its security to claim that you're using reasonable practices under the law. You can't deny having the message sent, and that's what the non-repudiation is. You sent it, the financial transaction went through because it has the technical controls in place to ensure that. Auditability, you hear this thrown out more now. I always think it is very interesting that if you're a publicly traded company, you are required to have an independent auditor, one of the big four, come in and review your financials, but yet there is no requirement for a third-party audit of your electronic systems unless you are under FedRAMP, which is the federal standards for cloud services, and then it requires a third-party authorization and audit. And yet we use independent auditors required by law under the SEC to independently audit the financial records so that we know publicly traded companies, those that sell stock, not privately traded, publicly traded, have the correct financial controls in place, yet we do not have a requirement yet to require similar auditing of computer systems unless it is FedRAMP compliance, which is something we'll talk about later, for cloud. Now here's some key points. Some technical but not all terms have legal definitions. In this course, check for a legal definition first. If there's no legal definition, then we just go to our sources for our standards and guidebooks from NIST. Typical law, regardless of what kind of law, patent law or any kind of law, is if you don't define the term and there's no legal definition, it falls to its common use. So when you write a contract or you have a patent or something like this, I have a patent in drilling fluids. A synonym for drilling fluids is mud. So a mud engineer isn't someone who plays in the dirt, but a mud engineer is a person who works with drilling fluids. And in my patent, I explicitly defined drilling fluids as being synonymous with the term mud, because otherwise, if I use the term mud, it would default to its common meaning. This is a principle throughout law. So here's why it's important. I want to go back to this. If I'm defending or prosecuting in criminal, remember criminal is government versus an individual or an entity, a company, or defending or prevailing in civil, which is an entity versus an entity or a person versus a person or whatever, I'm going to look for those definitions first. And then I'm going to try to use them either to defend or prosecute or defend and prevail in my case. I'm going to try to twist on it. So let me give you a brain tweezer. Is a smartphone legally a computer? Is a poker machine legally a computer? First thing you should be thinking is, let's check to see if there's a legal definition for computer.